Audio made possible by www.jackettome.com. Audio Fanfiction Productions presents Wide Awake. Fanfiction written by Angskata003. Fanfiction inspired by the Twilight Saga written by Stephanie Meyer. Chapter 27. Heavenly Hazelnut Perfection. Bella's Point of View. I exited the French doors downright elated, not even minding the freezing rain as I lively made it over the railing of the balcony and down the lattice with ease. Edward had definitely changed since New Year's, and I was pretty much enjoying the crap out of it. I was hoping that all these new changes in our routine would become permanent. Or as permanent as they could be. I showered quickly, relieved to start school again. Truthfully, being locked up in the house all day had its downsides. I was actually looking forward to returning to Forks High. It was a rather frighteningly uncharacteristic reaction. In honor of the occasion, I cooked Alice her favorite breakfast, blueberry waffles. And because I was in such a good mood when she came bouncing into the kitchen whistling, I really did whistle along with her. She stooped in her tracks and turned to me, then we both busted out in laughter. It really was quite ridiculous. She spent the meal and the ride to school chatting with me happily, and I gave her my full attention, as an attempt to make up for all my awful behavior after Christmas. And really, I didn't mind. My mood had surpassed the Alice chatter danger zone. I felt invincible. That is, until we arrived at school. She and Jasper both leapt from their respective car doors at exactly the same time. It was weird, really. The way they were so synchronized. I just stood beside the car waiting for her with my hood up and my head down. The cold rain was still coming down, and I was getting rather impatient. Then it occurred to me that I hadn't been to school since her and Jasper hooked up. Which probably meant I would be flying alone from now on. With a huff, I started across the quad without waiting for her. I couldn't blame her. If I could be with Edward in the daytime, I probably would never leave his side. The thought made me sigh at the linoleum floor of my first period class. I couldn't really figure out why it mattered to me so much. I had resolved to take what I could get. And I had gotten so much more than I'd ever expected. I should be happy with it. And I was. I wandered the halls with my hood up, slopping a bit onto the floors as I cringed past all the people around me. I was definitely out of practice from vacation when it came to blocking people out. I struggled towards every class to put my shield up, cursing myself for becoming so comfortable. And actually looking forward to such torture. On my way to third period, I had anticipated seeing Edward. Or at least catching a glance at him as he passed me, and I could feel him coming as I sloshed across the wet cement of the quad, the source of the electricity that always made me tingle and feel at home. Without a second thought, I lifted my hooded head to the direction I always knew he traveled. And was rather surprised to see him looking at me as well. His newly intense green eyes held mine as he passed, so close that I could smell him. And without even thinking about it, or really trying, my fingers twitched out towards his and we touched. The shock of electricity that his touch held momentarily relaxed me from the stiff posture I had assumed all day. Worried that I had just subconsciously crossed the line and risked our exposure, I kept walking hastily, hoping that no one saw and that Edward wasn't upset about the incident. The thought of him losing this new intensity was enough to make me want to stay in line. As soon as I re-entered the busy halls from the quad, my tense posture returned. I bobbed and weaved past the people, hugging the walls when necessary. And by the time third period was over, my muscles were almost sore from the tension of sitting beside Tyler Crowley all hour. I was rather pleasantly surprised when I entered the lunchroom and saw Alice sitting at our table. Without Jasper nonetheless. I gave her and rose and Emmett my perfunctory nod of hello as I took my seat and began rifling through my bag to retrieve my books and cookies. As I was sitting up, I began to feel the tingling sensation again. The same one I got on New Year's night. It was almost like a trace amount of Edward's electricity. I lifted my hooded head to his table, and sure enough, he was staring at me intensely. I got lost in his stare and his trace amount of electricity as I gazed back lovingly and longingly. His new sparkling green eyes shone with a new intensity that relaxed me minutely at the sight of it. I was pleased by the relaxing reaction that I was gaining from his unusual stare, but was also afraid I was taking an unnecessary risk by continuing. So I sent him back a small grin and broke our gaze to read my book, determined to remain on my best behavior. I could just barely feel him behind me on the way to biology after lunch. It was something new to me. I had always felt his electricity, but it had become more magnified over the last 2 days. And as I took my seat beside him, the electricity surged momentarily, relaxing me yet again, and nearly making me sigh. It was a movie day. And Mr. Banner always chose the most disgusting material to subject us to. Today was no different. Parasites. The word alone was off-putting enough. He flicked the lights off as the class participated in a collective groan at the sound of the subject matter. I had my hand resting atop the lab table, when I felt Edward grab it. I was momentarily worried before I felt him bring our hands below the table, and began caressing mine soothingly with his thumb. And every muscle in my body eased with the contact and his intense electricity. I smiled into the dark, more pleased by this new occurrence than he could possibly imagine, as I squeezed his hand back. I am quite glad to say that I know absolutely nothing about the parasites Mr. Banner had on that screen. Because I spent the whole class with Edward. I mean, technically, I spent every biology class with Edward. But today, I really spent it with Edward. He would draw his hand back, and run his fingers across my palm in a way that almost made my breath hitch. Then I would return the gesture, gliding my fingertips across his warm palm and savoring the calming current of our touch as I smiled into the darkness of the room. I channeled every soft caress with all of my love for him, trying to show him how much I appreciated the small gesture. And by the time the movie was over, I was so relaxed that I thought I might fall asleep. We grudgingly detached our hands, softly sliding our fingertips against each other's palms once more before the connection was broken, and the current returned to a tingle. I could feel him walking behind me again towards Jim. And I was glad for the remaining tingles, because our classroom antics had completely dissolved my shield. When I felt him move away, likely to go to his class which was nowhere near the gym, I battled to block out the bodies around me. My muscles constricted instinctively against the people walking near me as I made my way through the door of the large gymnasium. I entered the locker room hanging my head lower than normal. Jessica Stanley still had a bit of a grudge against me for the whole basketball incident, and I had no desire to bring any more unwanted tension to myself. The first time I had ever dressed out in the locker room, people had made notice of my scars, so I had made a habit of dressing out in the privacy of the stalls. I could hear them snicker and whisper every time I entered the stall and closed the door. I was the only one who took the precaution, and that fact singled me out. Especially since I was pretty sure that news of my scars had already gotten around quite thoroughly. I slipped my hoodie on afterwards like I always did, and exited the locker room before any of the other girls. They were all too busy talking, and gossiping, and fixing their hair to give a crap